Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. I just want to point out a few features before we get started. There's a red arrow in your taskbar. If you click it, it'll minimize your taskbar. And there's also a question section on your taskbar, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, type them into the question bar, and then you can submit and we'll get to them at the end.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, for being our master of ceremonies and for keeping us moving along through this webinar. Hello, everyone, and I just want to give you a warm welcome to the final session of the myFootpath webinar series. Today's topic, Innovate, Inspire, and Succeed, Trailblazing Strategies for Enrollment Growth. And folks, I think you're really going to enjoy today's session and listening to thought leader, an expert who has taken her practical experience and applied to have a significant impact on her campus there. And I think the key aspect of these webinar series is you can learn from others about how you could apply it at your institution. And because you are critical at your institution's success, by bringing these expert skills and knowledge and practices can really help you be successful in your own campus. My name is Jerry Hanley, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this webinar series. After about 40 years in higher ed and 20 as the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Senior Director of Academic Technology at the Cal State System, it really is a pleasure to share and facilitate learning about strategies for recruiting, re-enrolling, retaining, and graduating students who have stopped out of our programs, and how this strategy is going to be essential for our success. All our institutions want to make sure we graduate our students and they become employed in sustainable living wages rather than stopping out and having significant debt to pay off. And the other aspect is when we're all finding challenges in enrollment coming in of new students, looking at how we can bring our stopped out students back into our institution and really enable them to be successful, and as well as your institution to demonstrate its empowerment for educating our students. Now, for me, when I was at Cal State, and I was responsible for Cal State Online, I was asked to create a reconnect program. That is, how do I re-enroll stopped out students? And I wish I had a chance to have learned from others rather than kind of reinvent the wheel in many ways. And it wasn't as effective and efficient as it could be in planning and implementing these programs. And today's speaker is my wish come true. Our speaker is going to bring, and I'm going to introduce her in just a second, but she's going to bring a strategy that you can implement in your campus. And the other aspect is the Northern Arizona University partnered with myFootpath that brought a set of tools and capabilities and expertise that really empowered her staff to build that capability and be successful. And I'm very grateful for the myFootpath sponsorship, facilitation, and contributor to these series. And JT Allen, the CEO of myFootpath, is that person who's made that happen. So I'm going to pass it over to you, JT.
Thanks, Jerry. As we advance to the next slide, a little bit of background. So myFootpath, our focus is really on helping stop-outs and helping universities bring back stop-outs. We have a couple different services to do that, but the slide we put up here really speaks to the market. There's over 40 million stop-outs nationally today, and it's up close to 2 million in the last year. So it's a pervasive problem kind of across the higher education landscape. And it's one that we work hard every day to help universities sort of bring them back. And so part of the work that we do, there's different ways that we do it. We can provide full service solutions, we can provide consulting services, but to help universities think hard about how to effectively re-engage their population. And so I'm thrilled today for our speaker to talk a little bit about how we're doing that at one institution. And Jerry, I'll pass it back to you to introduce Anika.
Great. Well, thank you, JT. And it really is my honor and pleasure to introduce Anika Olson, who brings 25 years of higher education experience to her role as Vice President for Enrollment Management. And I think that experience, where she has also been in various administrative positions from housing and residence life, Greek life, admissions, communications and orientation, you now have someone who can speak, who really understands the culture and the operations of a university and the student services that are so important for engaging them and helping those students be successful. She's also been recognized for her expertise as a principal and consultant for EAB enrollment services, advising some of the nation's most notable colleges and universities about how they can improve and innovate their operations and recruitment. And Anika's team at the center of the Northern Arizona University's initiative called Realizing Attainment Impact through Strategic Enrollment. And what this is all about is ensuring access for students to successfully meet their academic aspirations when we are in a time of unprecedented change. So where you have someone who brings all this knowledge and expertise, and what drives it is her passion for placing students at the core of the university to ensure that the university is making decisions that lead to the success of our students. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Anika, who's going to set the stage about the wonderful university that she's at, the innovative university at Northern Arizona.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jerry. I'm a little embarrassed. And to the myFootpath team for allowing us to highlight this work together, because it really has been a true partnership. And the myFootpath team really has been an extension of our enrollment team, which I'm very grateful for. But let's set the stage here in Arizona. At NAU, we aim to be the preeminent engine of opportunity, vehicle for economic mobility, and driver for social change here in Arizona and beyond. And part of that ethos is really doing no harm. So when students come to us and entrust us with their educational goals and aspirations, we take that very seriously. It's a time and monetary commitment, and we want to make sure they are successful when they join us as lumberjacks. When we began this work, we knew that the state of Arizona was deficient by over 26,000 bachelor's degrees annually when we look at the growth of the economy in our state. There wasn't a match. We wanted to make sure Arizonans had first crack at those jobs with their bachelor's degrees. And so we started really paying attention to how can we take that ethos of doing no harm, our mission to be the driver of social change, economic mobility, and opportunity, and make sure when students came to us that they didn't leave, that they completed. But in doing so, we really had to look at our recent history and go back and say who didn't finish. And that's where the myFootpath team came to us, and we saw a great opportunity for a partner. And that really the deficiency in bachelor's degrees, that we could be a part of changing that moving forward. Prior to our partnership, we, students would reappear occasionally. There weren't any specific efforts to regain them. Soon after they maybe didn't enroll for the next term, we would do some reach out. But once students had been away for, 1, 2, 3 terms, we didn't ever really go back and try to re-engage them with us, maybe by happenstance. but not any direct specific efforts. And so that's where the myFootpath team really came into play for us, and that's how we partnered. That's how the partnership started back in 2019.
Thank you for that that background, and connecting this re-enrollment to strategic issues for the university is so important. Now, one of the things is often your organization, and I can say in California, we have directors of enrollment management, but it's directors of new enrollment management, not re-enrollment management. And the students who are re-enrolling are not the same as the students who are brand new. So how do you really begin to blend in these new requirements, these new responsibilities into an organization that really, and I'll say is probably pervasive in higher education, who aren't really prepared for the re-enrollment process?
Great question, and it didn't happen overnight, and I would say it's something we're still working towards. So we began this partnership in the later part of the fall of 2019, and we didn't have any staff team that was like, oh, pick me, I want to do all of this work. It really required us to look internally in enrollment management in our one-stop, as well as our admissions processing team, and explain the need to that group, and then reach to advising our registrar's office, academic affairs, to make sure courses were offered when students wanted to re-enroll. And so it truly was a cross-divisional effort. And thankfully, colleagues at NAU understood that this was a population that we needed and had a moral obligation to really go back out and give them a pathway and an on-ramp back to the institution. And really, quite honestly, Jerry, if not NAU, where else could we encourage them to attend? Certainly we wanted to see them back at NAU, but we know that hasn't been the path, and we know that there's always a halo effect when you reach out to students and put opportunities back in front of them.
You said that it didn't happen overnight, but from what I've learned about you, it happened pretty fast in terms of higher education's timeline. Do you want to talk about kind of the benefits of that ReEngage NAU results? Because they really are amazing.
Yeah, I'm very proud of these results, and you can see certainly the number of students impacted by our fourth year is over 2,500, which is phenomenal. We're a campus of just over 28,000, grad, undergrad, online, our statewide, and our main campus in Flagstaff. And when we began this effort, we kind of assumed that a lot of students would be going just back online. And that's true, but we also found that initially a lot of students wanted to be back on the main campus or in one of the Arizona communities where we partner with our community colleges. So it's been really interesting to watch that flow in as well. Certainly, re-enrolled students bring revenue to the institution, and that certainly has been amazing, especially in the last couple of years in higher education. Revenue, I would be remiss, our CFO would be remiss if I did not mention revenue, but it does match, this program and this partnership really does match with our mission and strategy moving forward. I will also say it didn't happen overnight. It did happen a little quicker, but we also had very willing leaders ready to champion this work as well. And so, myself, of course, but then our lead in academic advising, our registrar, our team at the One Stop, making sure that we were identifying key people, and also understanding that the way this partnership is designed, it's not for myFootpath to do it for forever and ever for NAU. It's to teach us along the way through the partnership to build that capacity in-house. And so when we've had employees leave to go move on to other opportunities, we've been able to think, okay, now planning ahead, do we want to reallocate this position to this effort, knowing that in another year, year and a half, 2 years, we are going to be taking this work back in-house. And so that's been awesome discussions as well amongst leadership across campus, as well as we're examining and trying to find efficiencies in our own system, which the myFootpath team has been very helpful with.
That's just wonderful. And what I'm, hearing you say too is that, and the numbers are here, is you've moved from adding an expenditure onto a campus that no one ever wants, but when you look at it, it's really, you have to think of it like an investment, because look at the return on that investment that you have of, you've gained almost 2,500 out of 2,800. That's almost 10% of increase in enrollment, and any campus would go, wild about that
Right.
type of increase and the funding. So that now, that's the outcome that we all would like to achieve. Now, how you want to give us a little background about how do you make this happen?
Sure, yes. So it all starts with the data and who's in your pool. So as I mentioned, we had gone back a term, 2, maybe 3, to try to re-enroll students that had come to us and stopped out as an undergrad, had applied and shown interest in us and never attended, or who had graduated with their bachelor's but hadn't gone on to a graduate degree. So those were that was the big kind of wide net cast here. And that's where we get to that 579,000+ students. We then wanted to make sure that those students weren't currently enrolled or had completed somewhere else. And that's where that National Clearinghouse data really helped us determine where they were now. And if they had completed a bachelor's degree, would they be interested in a master's degree? And so after that, we added our own data flags. Students that had an outstanding balance above our enrollment threshold was one of those, for example. Another was if they had re-engaged with us through one of our community college partners. We have a 2NAU program, so our community college system in Arizona, 2NAU. So if they were involved in that program, we didn't want to muddy the waters, so to speak, and have the operation, have our Operation ReEngage team through myFootpath reaching out to them and that, because we were already working with them at their local community college. The last 2 years of stop outs, we had always done a pretty good job of re-enrolling them, so we filtered those students out as well. So once we got through cast the wide net with the big group, ran through Clearinghouse, added our own data flags, we ended up with a pretty decent number of just over 365,000 students. And my reaction when I first saw that was, what? It was much larger than I had thought. And my team kind of sheltered me a little bit from it, our amazing data team, when they had pulled the initial almost 600,000. Because they knew I would be a little surprised.
Well, that is a huge number, and I can imagine anyone being a little bit in shock. And JT, if you don't mind saying, is this kind of size of the opportunity that a university has to re-enroll students? Is that number what you've seen around universities around the nation?
Yes, and I'll tell you, certainly universities are affected by size, but almost always, every time we run this data with a potential client, and they look at the size of the potential re-engagement pool, it can be a little overwhelming. So, and the reason is because we go back 20 years in the data. And what you find is, especially with adult students, right? You're never quite sure when they're going to be ready, but we cast that wide net in order to, when they are ready, we're in the conversation with them. So that's step 1 of the process. But as we turn to the next slide, Anakah, I'll pass it back to you to talk a little bit about step 2, which is some of the different processes we examined.
Definitely. And this was interesting. You saw the numbers, you saw the net tuition revenue gains. Excellent. all boards and cabinet members love those numbers. But what was a pleasant surprise throughout this partnership so far has been the ability for us to examine our processes that we have made because we thought it would be efficient, but not with the student at the center of those processes. And I'm sure everyone listening can probably name a handful, if not more, processes that serve as barriers for students that it would be really nice if you could change, but is really, Jerry, to your point, takes a long time. With our group and key leadership across the university all sitting around and learning from the myFootpath team what was a barrier for students, enabled us to fast track changing some of our very own processes. And let's just look at that top one, the readmission process. This process, when we started with myFootpath, was a classic PDF form that students would download, print, fill out, scan, upload, and return to us. So not a super friendly digital first experience for students. And students had already been enrolled with us. They were raising their hand saying, I want to come back and finish at NAU. We weren't as I mentioned, we weren't doing any specific targeted marketing to this group. So they were presenting up to us as very willing returners. And we were yielding at a 6% with those students. I don't want to blame the PDF, but we changed that process under the guidance of our myFootpath team. We brought it lived outside of admissions. We brought it into admissions. So the whole group, all admitted or readmitted students could be processed similarly and quickly. And you can see our yield skyrocketed. I don't know anyone that doesn't want to see a 60 percentage point lift in yield. And that is exactly what happened. Similarly, our processing times in admissions, you can see most students are coming back with some transfer credit as well. Maybe they left NAU, have transfer credit from 30 days down to 2. Efficiencies in the graduate process as well. So just financial aid, 45 to 10 days. I mean, we could go on and on, but it was helpful to have an external team saying, this is a challenge. And some of those things we haven't been able to fix yet. I do think it's worth mentioning here, we started November 1st of 2019 with myFootpath, and then we all know what happened a few months later, just as we were getting really going in the campaigns, and JT and I had identified a number of things we wanted to change and streamline, and one of those was electronic signatures. Now, if we had gotten that done before COVID, probably our life on campus would be a lot easier during COVID, but we didn't, and that is now kind of our top priority heading into this late fall and spring, and making sure that our CIO and necessary tech team and offices are at the table for that discussion in a few short weeks. So lots of great work done on these processes, still certainly more to do. But this was an area that you don't see in those in the number of students returning, certainly, but not necessarily in the net tuition revenue, but has been a huge game changer for us in our efficiencies.
And I look at the time changes, 30 days to 2 days, or 48 days to 10 for financial aid. That's light speed in higher education. And it sounds like, your leadership is essential to help bring all these people together, and partnering with myFootpath would help bring that extra capability, because you're one person and you might have a small team. And I think that's often in higher education, we're overcommitted and under-resourced, but so having a partner help get through this is really important. And maybe JT, is what you're seeing and what Anika talked about, is this what also are some of the critical processes that you see in other institutions?
Yes, absolutely. And so, and I think it's important to point out, though, that each institution is different. And so part of our work is to really understand and meet you where you are, meaning that, you know, some processes work fine, right? Don't mess with them. But then some of them need some attention, right? And so what we try to bring to every partnership, and NAU in particular, is really the market perspective, right? So when you're dealing with an adult student who's coming back online, and some of the competitors, you know, have a process where you can sign up in a day, you want to kind of be cognizant of that. And then also to overlay, you know, as Anika kind of alluded to, you can't change them all right away, right? So what we do is we put them on a list, we prioritize them and say, this is where you're going to see the biggest impact. Let's do that first, right? So that's the part that, you know, is unique. Well, I should say runs across each client, but taking into account their unique circumstances. Anika, why don't I pass it back to you, and you can talk a little bit about some of the partnership philosophy.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, this was timing. I mentioned it was just right before COVID, so we kind of got started and then feel like we stalled a little bit, because certainly on campus our efforts were directed 24/7 to managing that, probably not unlike many of you on the call. But what has always been helpful with myFootpath has been, like, JT, Robin, our whole team, how do others do this more effectively than what we're doing? So not only those processes from the previous slide, but taking the time to come to campus and to meet regular in person or virtually, to continue to understand as we evolve as a campus. You know, a lot has changed on campuses in terms of how we're delivering services and learning to students during and after the pandemic, and still trying to find and calibrate some of that. And the myFootpath team has been so helpful every step of the way to not only check on us, but also help us understand how we could be better. As I mentioned at the start of our time together, we didn't have the capacity to do this in-house. I wasn't given a bucket of new money and said, hire a bunch of people to do this. That's typically not the way it works, as we all know. And so JT's team is an extension of our enrollment management and early advising team as well. Certainly, we've worked to say, okay, no, let's pass that over to our one-stop. Okay, one-stop, let's pass that over to myFootpath. But those are pretty unique circumstances, the way we've designed the partnership. And so it's just been so helpful that over time, you know, we've been able to reallocate position lines and create efficiencies and really learn from the myFootpath team what works, what doesn't work, how we can internally build our own capacity. So at some time in the next 18, 24 months, we can take more and more of this work in-house.
Well, you know, Anika, what I, through this presentation so far, what I'm hearing is, when you have Northern Arizona University having a strategic plan, they have leadership in place, but you don't have the operational capability that JT and his team really become partners. And honestly, what I often don't hear universities talk about commercial providers really being part of the team and listening, and that's some of the hallmarks that I'm hearing you say is why myFootpath works so well for you, was listening to the culture, to the needs, to understanding your processes, and adjusting what were priorities, not necessarily for them, but were for you to solve at this point, and making that customization that's so important, and managing, you know, when COVID hit, I'm sure everyone had 10 more challenges on their plate, and being able to weave that in, right, or 20, right, whatever it is. So that's wonderful. And JT, in this kind of partnership process that you have, I'm assuming how that partnership works, has variability across? There's probably some constant, but some variability too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's about understanding kind of the unique situation of each university and kind of digging into those pieces that will drive it. But so critical is, I mean, I say on every college that has ever looked at this, we can't do this without the partnership, right? We need the internal NAU team to really make it go, right? And we overlay our work and assistance to collaboratively focus on the areas that make it go the most, right? And we focus in on there, and then we work down it. So, but I'll tell you, one of the key things that I think we've also done is sort of set up different lines of communication. So as we turn to the next slide, Annika, maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. And that's key too. And Jerry, as you pointed out, I mean, there were times that JT and I really wanted to like push a new process, but like it wasn't good timing on campus. And being able to have that really honest communication. And I would also say that during this time, so we started this partnership and then kind of had to adjust with the pandemic. But also during this time, we were implementing a new instance of our CRM. And I think so often it's easy to say, oh, we're going to do this project first. And then just this last year, implemented a new learning management system on campus. So being aware that those things are happening, but the imperative was so great that we didn't want to not do the partnership with myFootpath. And in fact, myFootpath team helped us kind of keep those projects really student focused. What do students need? What do we need to be able to assist them most effectively? So it really was about using those technologies and having a core team, leadership team on campus that meets quarterly with the myFootpath team to understand all of that is key. So we didn't want to say, okay, let's do the projects first and then let's do the LMS and then we can entertain whether we want to start something like this. We did those together and they were complementary of each other. So I did want to mention that as we're looking at this streamlining external and internal communications. With that, our communication journeys that we did in-house, we wanted to make sure we weren't stepping on the myFootpath journeys. And so making sure that those were aligned together was key. That steering committee, which I already mentioned, that key leadership team on campus that meets with the myFootpath team quarterly and regularly is on the phone is key. I serve as the point of contact for campus, but by no means am the only decision maker. It's really about making sure the right people are either in the Zoom room or around the table when we're meeting that way. We also wanted to make sure that our experts were in the room. You know, I am not an expert in scholarships and financial aid, and my scholarships and financial aid team would tell me that, like, nope. And so we wanted to make sure that the experts were meeting with the experts so we could serve the students the best. That's it. So it's making sure the right people were available to do just that.
For me, that's a really important role to really facilitate all that communication so collaboration is possible. And with the complexity of higher ed, a lot of times, right, it's the Hamilton, story of you want to be in the room when it happens, right? And often you don't get the right people in the room when it happens, and as a consequence, you can't be as successful. So I think your role, and this is all the audience here, you play an important role in bringing all the right people together. And as we move to the next slide, to look at how you build this team so they really do communicate, they feel comfortable with one another and share. And I think what you said about the honest communication of what's right for your campus and having a team to help you move forward on that is just wonderful.
Yeah, so you can see here is the myFootpath team that we've gotten to know so wonderfully. JT, did you want to highlight anything here with your amazing team?
I mean, I could talk about them a lot, but just for briefly for the audience, there's the team here. You know, it flexes by the size of your university and the population, and you know what there is to do. But the core elements that really are critical are, you know, sort of the client level management, the marketing that we collaborate quite a bit on with for the outreach and the right messaging. And then as those hand raisers come back through that marketing, then the team, we call them graduation specialists, are there to catch that student and then sort of shepherd them through the process as they go. But it's not just our team. It really is interactive across the university and NAU, and focused on, well, what do they need as their next step? And so that kind of underlies, you know, our philosophy there.
Yeah,
Why don't we go to the next slide?
Process that I hear, and look at what's possible, right? And so on the next slide, Annika, you want to say, you know, what are you shooting for here?
Yeah, I mean, you can see we would love to track and get to that 5,000. I think it's a realistic goal. We don't want to set goals that are like 28,000. We want to match. I mean, that would be awesome, but you know, 5,000, we feel that in partnership is a very attainable goal. It again maps us back to more bachelor's degrees of students and doing no harm, making sure that they succeed when they entrust NAU with their educational path.
Yeah, and that's a huge percent of your total enrollment population, and you know, and given the size of that total prospect, you can go higher over time too as well. That's just amazing. And JT, is this what you're also seeing and happening in other institutions, this type of growth? That's where the institution is building its capacity to be more successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we turn to the next slide, this is sort of our view, right, of how do you make it happen at your university. And so what we do and try to bring to each partnership, and we think of it as our competitive advantage, is using that, you know, data, analytics, and understanding of your processes to apply effort in the right place. So certainly there's research and systems that are all behind that. There's a team to help actually get the folks through the process, but that's the critical piece, is sort of looking at it strategically and collaboratively with institutions. So that's the big takeaway that I would put forth for folks who want to entertain this. But re-engagement is a powerful opportunity for universities, and if you're interested, definitely find us and we'll help.
And I think everyone, what myFootpath can do is get you started understanding the scope of the opportunity for you. And that once you have that scoping, then you can look at the next step and bringing in all those services. So and how this strategy for re-enrollment really becomes an investment strategy, not an expenditure. Oh, I got to get more money to spend. No, it's about how do you bring the value of your mission of your institution and the value to your students to the forefront. So thank you, JT. Thank you, Anika. And the last slide here is we're open for questions and comments that you might have. If you could put it in the Q&A here, and then we're happy to respond to those before we finish up in just a few more minutes. And Emily, have people been providing some questions for us?
Yep, so we have some questions here to ask you all. And if you have any more questions, feel free to type them in the question bar and we'll get to them now. So the first question that I have here from an audience member, is you highlighted a number of processes that made re-engagement successful at NAU. Many of them look like they are in the enrollment management function. Were there processes outside of the enrollment function that you worked on, and what other departments were involved, and what was the experience like?
Yeah, great question. Actually, that readmit process did not live in enrollment management originally, and now it does. And so that was one that excuse me, lived with our registrar's office, which in our model does the registrar reports through the provost team. Other key ones, another key partner on campus has been advising. You know, as enrollment management, we get students in and through the financial aid processes and then advising. And we had some challenges with advising. We had high turnover. That was more challenged during the pandemic and coming out. And internally, we knew that. But we were able to structure a team with myFootpath that has a single point of contact in advising, and also we're able to understand that our 8-week online courses, where the pain points were of getting students re-enrolled. You know, we don't want to have a student waiting for 15 weeks or 14 weeks or 10 weeks to start the course. Having every 8-week consistent starts is something that we're still striving toward. But we were able to work together to do some analysis of those courses and to understand what needs to be offered on a regular cadence for us to be more successful than even the numbers show today. So that's another one that's somewhat ongoing, but one that definitely involved a very large team under our vice provost, our senior vice provost of academic success, and our advising lead.
Okay, ready for another question? Okay, I've got a couple left here. The next one is, we've got a lot of committees at my institution. You mentioned you formed one at NAU. What was the focus and how did you structure it?
It's our steering committee, and thankfully we had presidential support for this effort. And so working with the president at the time, we identified key executive team leaders to serve on that steering committee. That steering committee is not in the day-to-day. They're not, you know, thinking what processes do you need to change today? But having an executive level team that understands the goals and that allows the team to examine the work and to be successful was key. So it wasn't really a committee structure per se, but it was key stakeholders. So we have our chief marketing officer, our online academic lead, our senior vice provost who oversees academic advising and student success, and then myself as the enrollment management team member. But at times, like I might be in those meetings, but really I'm bringing the financial aid lead and the admissions processing team lead that's really in the weeds, in the day-to-day to really make the magic happen for students. I have found that having that executive level sponsorship, if you will, has been super helpful, because then if and when challenges persist and you need to reallocate a line or reallocate resources, or maybe just choose to not do something because you want to pursue this instead, then we knew who to go to. Right, in that team. That team is also given an update on how the partnership is progressing, similar to the number of students, net tuition revenue. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our CFO is also on that steering committee as well. So they're given executive summaries during our campus visits or our online quarterly updates.
I think what it also helps to do, as sort of I've observed, is, you know, at many institutions, there's transitions, right? People go into different roles. And so how do you kind of go in and out and sort of get quickly up to speed and kind of know what's going on and have kind of the institutional memory? This really helps to do that, right? So, and though that kind of quarterly cadence really seems to be enough, but not too much, right? Because everybody's got a lot of things to do.
And if I could add in, I think what you're saying, JT, there's a Goldilocks, right? Not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft, just the right amount.
Absolutely.
And I think the other aspect about that strategic importance of this is sometimes when people do get overwhelmed, they say, well, that's not my problem, right? And by having a, at the strategic level where it's everyone's business and the president says it's everyone's business, then you have a chance to support that, people not saying, no, it's not my problem. It's more, okay, how can I help? Because it's our university's problem, not just a particular department. And I think, Annika, the way you've led that group and facilitated that group is another critical aspect here.
I will also say that, it allowed us to look at internally. This was a priority. It wasn't another thing to add. It's a priority. So then we have to kind of examine, like, I don't have any more new resources. No one does. That's probably what people are thinking on the phone, like, that's not really realistic for me. But it's really looking at what are some of the things that we've always done because we've always done them. And maybe those are things that we can sunset out over time because this is now what we are going to focus on in a more intentional way.
And was it difficult to get the initial buy-in across the university?
I would say, I don't think it was, no, I don't think it was hard to get the initial buy-in. I think what was skeptical is that institutions are often approached by a number of vendors, and I use that term intentionally in this response, to do the next bet. Here's how we want you to spend your next marketing dollar or next enrollment dollar. This was a true partnership, and what was particularly, what spoke to that was that myFootpath was going to come in and teach us, and then we would sunset the partnership. It has an expiration date for us, so giving us enough time to launch the partnership, learn, change internal processes, and again, learning being the through line here, and continue to learn as we're bringing that back in. And it's not like all of a sudden JT is going to cut us off and be like, there you go, it's done. We're very intentionally looking at, okay, what populations do we feel we have the capacity now to take back in-house? And then maybe in another 6 or 8 or 12 months, we'll take back this chunk. And so that's the conversations we're beginning now in year 4. And so I think that was the part that was really easy, because although it's hard to look internally and have things pointed out to you that are not efficient and not student-centric, it needed to be done. And I think we all understood it needed to be done. And we needed some help in this regard because we didn't have a team that could just step up and immediately start doing this.
All right, we are past our webinar schedule time. So if you need to leave, you can leave. We'll send you a recorded version of this. And we're just going to take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll be done for the day. So I have another question here. What was the onboarding process like with myFootpath?
Well, thankfully, we started right before COVID. So JT brought a team to NAU and spent, I think, a whole week meeting with key team members to understand our processes, from how do we have our knowledge base in our CRM to why does readmits live elsewhere, and really digging in. And so there were big chunks of time that the myFootpath team spent with our functional areas across campus to understand, and then reported back like, okay, here's our next step. And then a lot of that work happened remotely, even towards the end of 19, because we didn't want to have them on campus for months and months. I'm sure they didn't want to be here either, but go back and have some assignments internally, and then in myFootpath, dig into some data and then come together again to decide when go time was. And that all happened before we launched. So October of 19 before our launch in November.
All right, one last question
I'll
here.
just add
Oh,
to
go
that
ahead.
real quickly. So one of the, I think the hardest things that institutions, so for example, we made a report request, right? And there's 17 fields on the report, and they looked at it and it was like, ah, right? I mean, that was the reaction. And we went in and we had a meeting. We said, just pull up what you look at now. And let's just look at it, right? Oh, well, your 17 fields are on these 3 reports. Just send us those. Done. And we got it done in 30 minutes versus had they gone and tried to create it and done all this stuff, it would have been a whole lot more work. And it was much more efficient by just getting together and collaborating, right? So hopefully we try to bring that when we can. That's a kind of an easy example, but that's one that I think resonated.
Great. Okay, last question. I heard you say a couple of times that you use data to apply effort. Can you share some examples of how that really works?
Yeah, Anika, you want me to take that one? So re-engagement is something that I really feel like you can work on it to eternity, right? So, I mean, look at the list. There's 365,000 people, right? So, how can you possibly create a connection with each of these folks, right? So part of what we do is really overlaying at each step of the process what's happening. And so, at that highest level, we have a marketing tool that it's primarily email. That's the workhorse. It's kind of always on. But as soon as there's an interaction, then we can follow up with a phone call, right? But the list to call is much smaller than the 365,000. And when you break down the other steps of the process, there's similar areas where you can focus in on who needs what right now. So that's kind of our approach to it. But I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Anika.
No, I mean, I think that's a perfect example. It's this big number that keeps going. And then as students are engaging, then the outreach happens. I think for us internally, it was really looking to the example I used with that readmit process, looking at the data of who was raising their hands to come back and how they were yielding. That number at 6% was shocking to me. These should have been easy re-enrolls, right? And they weren't doing that last step. And so creating some efficiencies and then looking at the end data point was key there. And we did that with each process.
Thanks. I'll hand it to Jerry to wrap us up then.
Yeah, well, with us, thank you, Anakah, for sharing your expertise and really hearing your passion about how important this is and your leadership that you enabled your institution to really innovate in this way that brought tremendous value to it. And JT, just hearing from you too, and the roles that you play and the listening that you do to an institution is something, and I'll just use what Anika said, vendors often don't. They're trying to tell you what you should do, but listening is what I hear myFootpath does to then say enables an institution to be successful and become a real learning institution. So just wonderful here. And I hope everyone who've been on the call, on the webinar, have learned something of value, and feel free to reach out to JT and Anika to learn from one another so you can be more successful. So have a good rest of the week, and thank you again for myFootpath for the sponsoring, and Anika for taking the time out for sharing your expertise. It was wonderful.
Definitely, thank you.
See you later.